Hello and welcome to a impromptu discussion about global CCaaS. Is that an oxymoron or not? I've got with me a fantastic person to talk to about this, Nerys Corfield. I hope I said that right. She always reminds me it's easy to pronounce, and then I can never pronounce it. So let's bring her on. There she is. How are you? How are we doing, Nerys?
Hello, Happy New Year to you, Dave.
Happy New-
Yeah, I'm good,
Oh,
thank
it's so
you.
great
And
to
you did
have you.
pronounce it right.
All right, excellent. So briefly introduce yourself. Tell people why you're here. Who the
Okay,
hell are who are
so
you? Who are you to talk about global CCaaS?
well, yeah, so it's a good question for this very impromptu discussion. So yeah, I'm Nerys. I'm slightly obsessed, I guess, with the CCaaS marketplace. I've done 25 years, 19 of which were in contact centers, running contact centers on different platforms. And then now I support customers in their ambition to determine which is the right technology to take them forward. And as such, I've sort of become as obsessed with the players in that marketplace and do a lot of analysis on them. And yeah.
And you have a funny name. Do you is that like a New York accent or not name? Well, your name is funny too, but I meant a funny accent. Is that a New York accent? What is that accent from?
No, I'm Welsh.
Welsh.
So yeah, Wales is like a little
Well, now
country
your
that
name is
sits.
perfectly normal, except for it doesn't have enough vowels. It has too many vowels. I mean, but
We like a
there's not that
vowel
many, I
in
don't know that
Wales.
many Welsh. I guess there's not that many Welsh to know. But
Tom Jones,
Terry Matthews from the
Terry
old Michael.
Matthews,
Yeah,
Sir Terry Matthews, actually, Dave.
that's right. That's right. Um, Well, he lost his Sir thing when he exited our space with the sale of Mitel. So dead to me. He's dead to me now. But anyway, let's talk about. So you're based in the UK.
I
I
am.
believe Wales is still part of the UK. But we'll keep us posted on that. And so you look at contact center. We met up in London. I don't know, about 4 months ago, and you look at contact center from a different perspective, from a European perspective. And in our brief conversation, I thought it was so interesting how your views are on the contact center space are different. So I want to talk to you. Let me ask you the first thing I want to ask you about is, I think it was about 5 years ago, maybe I might have that wrong, plus or minus a year. Gartner used to have magic quadrants for Western Europe contact center and another one for the US or North America. And then somewhere around 5 years ago, they changed it to a single global magic quadrant for CCaaS space.
Yeah.
So 5 years ago, did you agree with that? And what do you think of today about that?
I didn't agree with it then, and I don't agree with it now, because, well, I just don't agree. I just think that it means that we are now, there's a lot of players that are very US, North American focused that have come into the rich pickings that are now, license ready CCaaS buyers. But what they failed to understand, a lot of them that have come into the market, seeing it as highly attractive, is the differences with the European market. And I think that now, when you say about the now we have really one vendor that's European, that's on the quadrant, in Content Guru, that's your HQ in the UK. And do you argue that TalkDesk are European because Tiago's European himself?
Well, it's
really that's not where his funding is.
TalkDesk is tricky because they're a California company, but they're mostly developed in Portugal. Tiago's done a fantastic job of putting offices near all the universities in Portugal, and literally just and he bills TalkDesk as a Silicon Valley what's the word with valuable company? I can't think of the name right.
Unicorn.
Unicorn, thank you. I don't know if so he bills it as work for a Silicon Valley unicorn right here in Portugal. And so it's kind of he's done a very good job of mixing that. A lot of the contact center companies though have development centers in Europe. Five9 opened one in Portugal as well. In fact, in a talk desk office that they moved out of. And you've also got development in Ireland. We've got development in Budapest now. So there's a lot of European development going on. I guess a lot of it also happens in India, and I guess some of it happens in Israel. NICE has a big center in Israel. So I don't know. Israel's not considered Europe though. That's too far south. Huh?
And you know, and I think where the development centers are, does that mean that they understand the marketplace, or is that where the best resources are to do development? You know, just because you've got resources out in Manila doesn't mean you're spending and investing time understanding that marketplace and the needs of that marketplace, right? So yes, it's good for those respective economies, but do I get a sense that, and perhaps now it's different because now there is more of a foothold from those companies, and their brands are being more, you know, seen in Europe than they were when that merger happened. But have they got that intrinsic understanding, or do they actually just think that they can lift and shift what happens in the US and what CX looks like in the US and put it into Europe, when actually I think there's some fundamental differences, and I think there's some nuanced differences that get lost as well. So ultimately, I think Gartner has done a disservice to those companies, those CCaaS vendors who have served that European market well over the years and who have now lost their much, you know, needed marketeer's dream of a dot on that quadrant. And they're left with now CTOs going, well, if you're not on the quadrant, then you're not somebody that I want to talk to.
Yeah,
and I think
it's a tricky one because really Gartner is just really running the report for their customers, and their customers are big, typical multinational corporations, whatever. And it's just that the absence of so few other reports, and the Gartner has such a strong brand that it gets used by lots of other people, like the way you're saying. And so let's go back to Content Guru. I actually I ran into Martin not too long ago. I don't know what you call Martin. Is he the founder of Content Guru?
Yeah,
I made a comment to him like, you know, a lot of Americans only see them as a European company, just like a small little player. And he looked at me and he kind of said, you know, Europe's pretty big. You know, we're quite content with being a European provider, and quite good at it for that matter, particularly in the UK, where they've really taken over a lot of the major national services. It's pretty impressive. So let me ask you, well, do you think where the company is based is a factor in decision making? And so as a European, as a UK citizen, and also just in Europe in general, do you think the businesses want to do business with European companies if they have a choice, or is it not a factor? They just look at the features and functionality and price.
I think if you were to ask them in an ideal scenario, they'd want to buy homegrown solutions. But to be honest, that doesn't mean that they will compromise on functionality and price. So I think there's this notion, and particularly there's some European countries who are renowned for wanting to buy their own homegrown solutions. And really, why wouldn't you? However, there is that understanding and appreciation that the investment and the solutions that are coming out of North America are those that are having the R&D. I guess the question around Gartner is, I think that has been unfair for those CCaaS vendors that have historically well served the European market. And also, I do think that there are some North American focused vendors that have come in pretty arrogantly to just go, oh, we'll just lift and shift what we do in the US and it'll just work in Europe. And it's like, there are different languages, like a load of different languages to consider for a start. There's different data governance and data protection needs. There's a real different focus, I think, and I'd quite like to understand your thoughts on this, Dave, because I'm part of quite a few of the vendors' consultant sessions, and when I bring up this notion to North American counterparts, they're a bit like, what? Around what? You're crazy. No, environmental, social, and governance, which we're seeing as a procurement thing coming higher up the agenda, and wanting to buy business from businesses that do good things and have good people who do good things. And that's very much being led by a UK government ambition. And you talked about Content Guru, like you said, they serve a lot of public sectors. There's a lot of very big public sector bids in the UK and in Europe, and they look for that. So how does that look in the US?
It's funny you bring up ESG because just this week, I think it was this week, it's all blur, maybe it was last week, when Elon Musk said that ESG is actually quite racist. And so then Mark Cuban jumped in and said, no, it's not. And then other people jumped. So there's this whole debate about what's going on with ESG. But I believe, and I agree with you, that ESG is a much more important element to the evaluation process in Europe than it is in the US. The US can't quite figure it out. And that's partly because there's a really strong political movement in the U.S. That ESG is kind of caught up in. We saw it with the Harvard president being removed, but there seems to be a left versus right issue with ESG, with climate.
It's seen like a bit of a woke mentality, I guess.
And it's a shame, because what we're really talking about is responsibility to the entire communities, and it shouldn't be a us versus them type of thing.
Damn that saving the planet notion. It's just so woke.
Yeah. As many people know, I have an electric car, and one person said to me, electric car, you buy into all that nonsense? It's like, actually electric cars just are really nice to drive, but to him it was something that was more political. But I think if we back away from ESG for just a moment, I want to come back to it.
Yeah.
But there are some bigger issues culturally between Europe and North America. ESG being one of them. Another one is privacy, and this is what we talked about this when I was in Europe before, and it's a little bit about WhatsApp, which is a little interesting story by itself. But the fact that it's encrypted is much more common in Europe than it is in North America. But there's also data sovereignty is much more important in Europe, and now Germany's kind of I think legislated that as a requirement for a lot of companies. And the Europeans, I think, are a combination of being a little suspicious of these American companies like Twitter and Facebook and Google that have all their information. But it's also just I think a cultural distinction about a much more stronger value on privacy. And so with that in mind, how does that affect the contact center place?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that sort of data terrorist threats are becoming more and more real. And I guess the more that you can be assured of your data and where it's being held, and also how it's being accessed and whom it's being accessed by, and this notion that actually if it's under the regulatory of EU, which obviously the UK isn't under that, but they very much align to that GDPR, which is the governance that looks after a lot of data and data privacy. That is really important, and we've seen Schrems, we've seen Maximilian Schrems break down Schrems 2, and now the Safe Harbor Agreement is looking to be, put back together. And I think Biden and Ursula von der Leyen have now come to a new agreement, but how long will it be before that breaks down again? And therefore you are no longer a safe harbor for having data. But, it's really weird, because I think I've had this discussion a lot, because I think it seems to be very prevalent in European bids as this understanding around data governance and security and privacy. But that's very much for CCaaS. It's much less so for the CRM vendors. It's much less problematic for them. So, Salesforce, probably data's flying all over the shop, and nobody seems to care or ask the question. But for CCaaS, maybe because there's call recordings involved, and that's seen as much more private in its interaction status. I don't know why, but yeah, data governance, data security, and that side of things, it is important, especially, like you say, to the Germans, who to ratify GDPR took a lot longer than ever anticipated, because it was getting, all these countries to come together and agree on the rules. And Germany had a real direction of travel that they were already on that was very restrictive. And so there was a lot of pushing and pulling going on that sense. And Scandinavian countries, I think you mentioned before as well, they're very similar as well in terms of their data security. And I only see that going one way, going forward. We see America with TikTok and China, and like you mentioned, WhatsApp. I think there's going to be much more nervousness around data and a sort of public, because of GDPR, because of ChatGPT, this whole escalation of consumers understanding data and where it is, and that their data is, I think there's a bit of that as well going on. So yeah, I think we're a bit different in that sense. How are in America, in North America, is data governance, data sovereignty, and sort of understanding where it all goes and is stored, is that a factor?
Americans are much more trusting. It's actually surprising how much most Americans think their email is private, but there's Americans are just much more trusting in general than I think Europeans. Hey, we got a question here from Matt. Let me pull this up here. How do governance and security come into play when AI is part of the discussion? So you were just touching on that a little bit there with ChatGPT. You want to address Matt a little more clearly with his question?
Yeah, and I suppose this is where it now does start to differentiate between the UK and Europe, because Europe are pushing ahead with rules to start governing, AI, and specifically generative AI, and how you manage all of that. Whereas the UK, even though we hosted Elon Musk recently at, what is the next, Bletchley Park, which is where Alan Turing created the Turing Code. Anyway, the UK is sort of, my understanding is, we're saying we're not there, we're not, we know that something needs to be done, and it feels like the things that are going through our House of Lords are quite punitive in terms of, you're going to have an AI manager in your organization. It's like that manages the data. It's like, realistically, is that going to happen? I don't know. It feels like we're quite a way behind where Europe are, and I think America are moving forward as well, aren't they? Or have they already got legislation?
One thing I wanted to connect was, because you just mentioned the Scandinavians or the Nordics or whatever I don't remember what you said, but one of those two words. And one thing I think is very different about Europe, and I want to connect the points we made about WhatsApp and where software is actually developed, is I think Europe is a much stronger assumption that people are calling from a mobile device, and therefore have the ability to do more things with that mobile device than where America is still kind of largely assuming people are calling from a PSTN line, even though they aren't, and a landline, and it's just a voice-only channel. And so I want to go back to the WhatsApp here. You guys in Europe are just so WhatsApp centric. When I go to Europe, because now I'm living there part time. You have to have WhatsApp. You can't do anything without WhatsApp, and so I think that one of the things that we're seeing is, we were talking about Cisco. Cisco being a North American company probably wasn't that probably didn't prioritize WhatsApp as much as they probably should have. But then they acquired IMI Mobile, which is a European company, and they're like WhatsApp pros. And so it came out, worked out really well. And so I think there's just a big assumption in the channels that people, or different, not assumption, a big difference in the channels people use when they engage with corporations.
Yeah, no, exactly that. And that's really interesting, isn't it? That Cisco example of buying an organization that has got that heritage and that understanding of the adoption of WhatsApp and has got the ways and means to actually deliver that through their solution. But maybe that's the ideal scenario. Maybe everybody should mirror and get together with their counterpart from the other side, so they take those learnings and not just assume that what happens in their territory is exactly the same that happens in another. Because I'm on WhatsApp all the time, and not just at a personal level, but at an organizational level as well. So there is a real expectation that businesses can deliver through WhatsApp because it's free, because you can exchange images. Yeah.
And I don't know what to think of Vonage. Is Vonage a European CCaaS or not? Because Vonage, North American company, acquired, who did they acquire? They
New Voice Media.
New Voice Media, thank you. And so that was a European company, and then Vonage itself has been acquired by Ericsson. So it's like a double whammy. But I don't know if people consider Vonage a European provider or not. When it comes to
and that's a really good question. So they definitely have a presence here. I don't know if that clarity and this is the thing, isn't it? We live and breathe this all the time. And I'm on day 1.5 of being back. So asking me who Vonage bought is like, oh, who did they buy? Oh yeah, New Voice Media. I remember.
But you nailed it.
but buyers don't know and understand that. So now they're a new brand to most buyers. They're like, oh, who are they? Without understanding that lineage. It's like, there's lots like that, isn't there? You don't understand where that history comes from. Is it important? Probably in some cases, yes, because that for Vonage, my understanding of Vonage is they're like a big mobile company in the US, aren't they? Like with adverts all over the TV. They don't look or feel anything like that over here. And now Ericsson have, like you say, have bought them. Yeah. So I don't really see an awful lot of them, but they certainly have a really good presence at Call and Contact Center Expo. And I think they have a real plan to use that network that they've now got with Ericsson and all the experience from Vonage and merge it all together, I think.
Well, I like the way you say Vonage. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. We've been going for about 25 minutes. So you just mentioned a expo. Give us an idea of some of the bigger events in Europe that you think are important for contact center people, and any and then I'll come back and ask you about parting wisdom about global CCaaS. So what's on your calendar for 2024 as events that you want to be at?
Oh, well, I've just become part of the advisory board for Call and Contact Center Expo, which I've been going to for 25 years now, 26 this year, which is in November. That's really good.
Where's that at?
That's the same place that UC Expo, London XL. So when you didn't go to UC Expo, did you? Did you go there in the day?
I was there.
Oh, yes. Yeah. It's the same place,
yep.
But a couple of weeks later, which is kind of crazy, but there we go. So, and a lot of the same players are at both, to be honest with you, as you would imagine. But yeah, so UC Expo, Call and Contact Center Expo, that's a really great event. In Europe, they've got CCW, which is, I think, in Berlin. Do you know what? You could go to one every week. And actually, my New Year's resolution is that I'm just going to focus on a lot of consultancy and do less of speaking and going to events, because they're great, but they can suck up all your time. So there's loads of great stuff going on. But I'm gonna knock out, apart from Call and Contact Center Expo, and there's loads of great awards ceremonies as well. So
okay, well then let's talk about your consultancy. You just put your first name in your tag there on the video screen. How do people reach you if they want to learn more about contact centers in Europe?
Oh, by LinkedIn. That's it. Unless they got my WhatsApp.
Okay.
I'm not on Twitter. I was a Twitter quitter when Elon.
Okay.
X.
All right. So, parting words of wisdom. Let's address this to contact center people in general, but specifically, how important is a global reach? Gartner puts a lot of emphasis on it, but I just don't get the sense that a lot of organizations are global. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's the point, isn't it? A lot of organizations, certainly in the UK, 870,000 agents, 6,000 contact centers, most of which, only like 600 of them are over 5,000 seats. So actually, if you're a 500 seat contact center in Yorkshire, do you actually care that contact center has got sales resources and R&D resources in North America? Do you? Should you? Or actually, do you just really need to understand it's the right solution for you at the right price, and it can service all your needs going forward? So I'm not taking away from the fact that it's a good resource, Gartner, but it is not the be all and end all. And the merging has discounted some really good players. There's some excellent players that still exist on the quadrant, and they're players that I know and love very well. But it is not the only resource that you should be looking at to determine what is the right solution for you, especially if you're not a global player.
Excellent. Well, fantastic. Thank you for joining me in this conversation. Thank you for watching. Nerys, you've got so much knowledge in this space. I really always enjoy our conversations. Thank you so much.
That's all right. Lovely to speak to you.